you considered the messages your outfits send? What do you think your clothes say about you? See, style is about the clothes, but it's not really about the clothes. Every day you make choices about what you're going to wear, but what are you communicating? Welcome to Above and Beyond Style. I'm your host, Maria DiLorenzo, and in 2019, I founded MFD Style, where I provide a unique, intuitive approach to personal styling for those ready to embrace a more meaningful look. With this podcast, I'll uncover key elements of where spirituality, psychology, and style intersect, revealing how you can make intentional wardrobe choices that reflect who you really are. So let me ask you, are you ready to transform into your authentic self? Then it's time. Come with me on this journey, and together we'll take your style above and beyond style. Hey friends, welcome back to Above and Beyond Style. This is season 5, and I have taken a bit of a hiatus in the building of this season from season 4 to season 5. And there's been good intention and good reason behind that. And I'm excited to share a little bit more about what has been going on in the background since this season has been ready for your ears. So we left off in season 4. Melissa Carrick and I were working together, my wonderful conversation partner who was a surfer, a chiropractor, a spiritual enthusiast, and someone who I just very naturally could have real, honest, and clear conversations about change. And season 4 really was a bit of a departure for me from my traditional conversations around style. And I think one of the things that was helping inform this, if you are new to the podcast or new to my story, I'll do a quick synopsis for you. So a little over a year ago, I came into this idea that it was time for me to sell my home and venture out, if you will, to find what I would call a vibrant lifestyle. My word for 2023 was vibrancy. I had this very clear understanding that where I was living, my lifestyle, the community, the things that I was spending my time doing weren't really as vibrant as I really felt like I was called to be living. And it created a whole sort of series of questions in my head about, well, what am I going to do about that? And maybe you can resonate with that concept about when a question sort of pops in and you have the opportunity to be a little curious with it. Like, well, what am I supposed to do about that? Is that calling me to a different story, a different lifestyle, some different choices? And sure enough, it did. And the result, of course, was that I sold my home and moved in temporarily with a good friend while I've been on a bit of a journey, if you will, around travel and exploration, and really just giving myself the opportunity to feel and live untethered. And I don't know about you. I don't know if you have the experience of what that feels like, but it's been very unique to me. I try to be clear and upfront with people about I recognize the privilege in the circumstances with which I'm living. I'm not married. I have no children. So the ability to sort of pick up and go and do what I please is basically at my fingertips. And while that might also sound really liberating and freeing, it also comes certainly with its own challenges. And the obstacles that I faced over this last year were sort of a testament of, how am I going to do this in a way that's going to feel good for me? Recognizing that this path and this story isn't anybody else's. And so part of the fun of talking about change with Melissa was to really help you see and hopefully normalize some of the change that I have been going through and maybe you have been going through too. So we had a series of conversations that had this sort of inspiration around riding the waves of change. And last year was an incredible testament of riding a lot of different waves as I was changing homes and thinking about the trajectory of my work and my lifestyle, and what really kind of rose to the surface, to continue to use the water theme, about what was my priority, what will become my priority as I'm moving forward with my life. And I think it's an interesting place to be at. And I'm writing and talking and speaking and really trying to capture so many of the lessons that I feel like I'm learning along the way. And part of that also is to do that with you in the podcast and to share a little bit more of the stories and to give you maybe some inspiration for how you could look at your life differently. If you're new to me, you would not necessarily know that I'm a pretty type A person. Like, I really enjoy structure and routine and predictability. And if you only met me this last year, you would probably argue against that, that I have not been someone who has really demonstrated a preference toward routine and predictability. I've been really trying to push some of those boundaries around, what they quote unquote always say, like, think outside the box or do things outside of your comfort zone. And I very much have been trying to lean into that to see if that results in a different kind of outcome for me. And the outcome being, again, around this sort of lifestyle vibe, um, the connection with people, the way I want to do my work. It all wants to feel different. And much maybe like you, I don't really know how to get at that instead of trying to do things a little differently than I've done them before. So, season 4 was this conversation with Missy about all these different waves of change and how it really inspired me at different times to try and experiment with new places. Talk to you a little bit about some adventures I went on. And where I left off in season 4 was I was just on a journey going into Europe for 6 weeks. And it had been a desire and a passion for me for a long time, actually, to want to go back to Europe. The first time I had been when I was, I believe, about 14, 13, 14. And of course, my memories of those places and the experiences that I had at that age were very different than where I am now at 45. So it's an interesting place to have had this experience abroad where I primarily was solo traveling and learning how to kind of negotiate and navigate all these different places and language barriers and things of that sort, mostly on my own. And then for the last roughly 10 days of my trip, my mom got to join me in Europe. And we had a really magical time and went right into the holidays, and boom, it was 2024. So here I am on the other side of 2024 and really looking at this last year and trying to kind of come to some clarity about what have I learned over the last year and where is my next step? And that's really where season 5 is going to join us together. I have a little story to tell about numbers. And this is kind of a funny little thing to know about me. And I don't know if this perhaps resonates with you, but over the last, I'd say really 5 years, which is probably no coincidence, I have started to grow and expand a bit more in my spirituality, my spiritual practice. And in that experience, it's interesting to see how I've learned to communicate and really be in relationship with, and you can name this however you'd like to name it, God, spirit, creator, whoever or whatever that being is that is greater than ourselves. And for me, I would say it's probably God, spirit is the two terms I use the most frequently. And in that experience of deepening my relationship with God's spirit, I started to really pay attention to some signs. And maybe that sounds a little woo woo to you. And at first, I think it started to feel that way for me too. I didn't really know what to make of some, let's call them coincidences, that were happening or starting to appear in my life that were happening more regularly, almost patterned, if you will. And one of the things that I'd like to share is about numbers and how numbers were a way that I really honestly believe I was starting to get some information and messages from God's Spirit about my life. And I don't know a lot about numerology, to be honest. I'm not somebody who has really dug into that study. But I do believe that the natural order, the world that we live in, is a method with which God's Spirit can use to help communicate information with us and to us. And so I think in this last roughly 5 years, I've just started to pay attention a little differently. And numbers were one of those things that started to catch my attention pretty early. And what I mean by that is I started to see number patterns. So 222, 333, 999. I would look at the clock and it would be 111 or 1111 or 222. I would be at the grocery store and I would get the total of the bill would be 888. So I was starting to see these repeated number patterns basically all over my life. It could be the odometer on my car, the clock, like I said, the total at the store I had just, purchased something from. And so where numbers were showing up in the natural order, I started to see these patterns. And I thought, isn't that interesting? I don't know that I've ever really noticed them before, and I'm sure the patterns have been out there. But all of a sudden it started to make me wonder if there's a message connected with some of these patterns. And it was about then that I picked up a book by Laura Lynn Jackson called Signs. It's this beautiful little book, has this gorgeous kind of baby blue cover with some kind of floral, maybe even a butterfly on the front of it. I haven't looked at the cover of the book in some time, but it's in my memory. And I read this book mostly with curiosity about signs and how and if the universe, God, Spirit, were speaking to me through the natural order using things like numbers, perhaps animals or flowers or rainbows, or, just thinking about the things that you see in the natural order. And when I cross paths with them, wondering if that had any kind of message or meaning for me. Again, this might sound a little woo-woo to you, but I'm telling you that it happened very, what's the right word? It's almost like it happened like the floodgates had opened. And I think once I started to kind of pay attention to some of these things that were showing up, the more and more I started to notice. And maybe that's just like a self-fulfilling prophecy kind of thing. Like you notice the color green where you actually look for the color green. And so maybe there's something to that too, right? That you're just creating conscious awareness towards something. But I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't know that that doesn't mean something or it doesn't have a message connected, because if it is showing up sort of in repetition, like I said, I got curious about it. So I read this book by Laura Lynn Jackson. I would recommend it if it's of interest to you, or if you ever have any kind of questions around, do signs exist? Are they out there in the natural order or in the world for me to notice? And are there signs that really mean something specific to me? Meaning, if I see a red cardinal, maybe it means something different to me than it might to you. And I'm offering this because I think this was sort of the way that the number 5 really started to come to me. And now I would say, again, for the last 5 years, again, no coincidence here, I would say these number patterns, again, I'm talking about multiple times a day, I would see different number patterns. And I would say probably in the last, let's say 3 years, I really started to catch almost religiously on the clock 12:34. And it would be 12:34 p.m. or a.m. Like it's uncanny the number of times that I would be doing something and I might just tap my phone to look at the time and it would be 12:34. Or I would be driving and I'd be kind of bopping around and along and I'd look over to the clock in my car and it would be 12:34. Or I would literally go to bed and maybe wake up suddenly and look over at the clock and it was 12:34 a.m. And I'm telling you, the number of times this has happened to me is crazy. In fact, I started to just screenshot on my phone the number of times that I happened to just capture 12:34 in that exact moment. And I went back and I counted. At least over the last 2 or 3 years, I've seen it probably 150 times. which is bananas to think about all the various days over the last however many years that I would catch that number at that exact specific time. And I think for me, it started to make me wonder, like, what is 1234 trying to tell me? Because at this point in the game, it feels a little ridiculous that I'm seeing it this many times. And for whatever reason, I wasn't picking up what it meant until it did. And I started to realize that 1234 is a sequence: 1, 2, 3, 4. And naturally, then, what is the next number in that sequence? The number 5. And so it was like the bell and the light went off in my head that all of a sudden when I saw 1234, it was my sign to do the right next thing, take the right next step, number 5. Whatever it is in the sequence next, that's what you're to do, or that's what you're to focus on, or play with, or pay attention to. And it was this very interesting kind of realization about, like, here I was taking what I would deem over the last 5 years a lot of really big steps in my life, from changing jobs to going full time with my styling business to moving out of my house, selling my home, being kind of a bit of a vagabond, nomad wanderer in the world. There were a lot of big things that I was trying to sort of figure out, like, what is the right next thing to do here? And it started to realize in my consciousness, I started to realize in my consciousness that here I was getting this affirmation, if you will, about just take the right next step. It doesn't have to be the biggest, grandest, clearest, most momentum type of step. It just has to be the right next one. And it was about the time that I came up and found Emily P. Freeman in the world. She is another author who wrote The Right Next Thing. And this book was a very interesting kind of point of connection for me too, because she talked about these micro moments of doing the right next thing in your life. And she has a really lovely spiritual Christian background that I was interested to sort of see sort of the lens with which she talked about making some of these choices and doing the right next thing with the kind of accompaniment, if you will, of spirituality. So it was interesting to me as I've kind of worked in and around these signs, the sequence, this 1234, and coming to the number 5. The number 5 then became really the reason why I wanted to have season 5. Again, no coincidence, season 5 of my podcast with you, talking about the right next thing. And in many ways, I'd like to have this conversation a bit broader than style, of course, because so much of my life is about kind of the broader lens right now and figuring out what the right next thing is and allowing myself to go down some different paths that perhaps I haven't taken before. But it also has to do with my style. Like, are there small, tiny little moments that we could start to introduce into our style that would help perhaps make a very big impact? And so it's those, what's the right next thing to do about how you dress, or how you think about fashion and style, or how you think about yourself, that really could help translate and inspire how you might live your life on a broader scale. So this season, we're going to talk about the number 5 a lot. And we're going to talk about these small micro moments that could take us to the right next thing. The right next thing that could be small or big and meaningful, or not really as meaningful as we might hope, but at least they're kind of moving us along this path of life and giving us the opportunities to explore and to try out some new things, maybe have a little fun, maybe make some mistakes. I feel like I come into, the longer I'm in this, let's call it kind of an in-between phase, that I learn to be okay with the not knowing, having a bit more detachment from the outcome, whatever the outcome is. It is a little trite to say is it really more about the journey than it is the destination? And this is kind of what I've been playing with. And trying to have more conversations, not only with myself, but with people in my life about, well, what's the right next thing for you? And if you were on this path in, as we all are, in different ways, managing different challenges and circumstances, it's fun to kind of think about, obviously the big right next step might feel a little overwhelming or out of our control or not accessible at the moment. But is there a smaller right next step that still keeps us going, that still keeps us on the journey, that still gives us the opportunity to see what happens, and perhaps gives us again that sense of accompaniment that the God, universe, spirit is with us, helping us, encouraging us. And I will say, especially for me, giving me those micro moments of looking at 1234 and saying, okay, I just have to do the right next thing. I don't have to know the big answer in this moment. Even though I would love to, I'd love to have the crystal ball and see how it all plays out. But that's not really how life works as a human. So this season is going to be a little bit of playing with the right next thing. Step number 5. And all the different ways that we could make small micro changes, improvements, steps towards something that might actually have a really great big impact, and especially with our clothing. I'm a firm believer that clothing is along for the ride of our lives, right? It's the way that we show up in the world. It's a way that we get to communicate various things about who we are and what we care about, how we feel about ourselves, and the version of ourselves that we want to put out into the world for people to know and experience us. And so, knowing that about the powerful tool that clothing is, I have always been such a proponent to be able to experiment and play with this, to have these perhaps small next steps that lead us closer to authenticity, to allowing us to show up as we really are, to have preferences that matter to us, that doesn't matter as we look into the outside world or sort of what's trendy or what's big in the fashion world or whatever happens to be in the stores from various merchants and retailers at the moment. Does that actually reflect who I am and what I want to be and show up to be? And so, having these conversations with you about where clothing can be that tool, that maybe that right next step, even for you, about how to connect with your own authenticity. And so much of my podcast and my story, and I think my life choices, are about trying to stay connected to that authentic person that I am and learning to be a bit more comfortable in sharing it more broadly in the world so that people get to know the real version of me. And no, I'm not going to be for everyone. And no, my preferences and choices and lifestyle and etc. aren't going to be everybody's cup of tea. But also learning that it's okay. I'm not supposed to be meant for everyone, nor are you. But you are the only one of you on this planet at this moment. So, what could we do then to embrace who we are, what we're about, who we want to be, and demonstrate that in a really powerful way? And that has always been why clothing has been such an important tool for me over the course of my life. And I will continue to talk about how clothing can be this tool. Talked about it in early episodes of my podcast about it could be the tool for support we need to do the hard things, to show up in our lives. And it could also be along for some of the best, most joyous, fulfilling moments we've had. It's really a fun thing to really embrace and connect with if you're open to it. So this season, season 5, taking the right next step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to go through this together. Dr. Melissa Carrick is going to be back. She's going to have some additional conversations with us around this topic and around some of, we're building off these conversations that we had together in season 4 about change and riding the waves and learning to embrace the unpredictability of life and change, and how that, especially with our clothing, can be an important tool to pay attention to, maybe even to help us navigate these waters of where we're headed. So she'll be back. I'm looking forward to giving you some really practical, maybe even strategic ideas around what are small micro things that you could do with your style that might actually make a really big impact. So it is that right next step. It doesn't have to be the big overhaul of the wardrobe where you're literally pulling everything out Marie Kondo style and you're asking if it brings you joy and pitching everything that doesn't. Yes, those are beautiful grand gestures, and I've been known to help many a client in that space. But maybe you're not ready for that quite yet. Maybe you need something smaller, more digestible. And I'm hoping to give you sort of the large picture, the inspirational story, coupled with some really practical techniques. And you can walk away, hopefully, making your right next step. So, friends, thanks for joining this season, and I look forward to seeing how this unfolds. More to come.
Hey there. I wanted to take this opportunity to tell you more about MFD Style, my wardrobe consulting business. I've been styling professionally for nearly 15 years, and it truly is my life's passion and purpose. In fact, my mission is to help you develop a confident and authentic signature style, breathe life into your existing wardrobe, and help you fill in with perfect, versatile pieces that are in line with your style and budget. And yes, all of this can be done both in person or virtually. This experience can transform your life. I have seen it happen countless times. And all you have to do is take that first step. Set up a free 30-minute consultation call with me, and we can start this journey together. You deserve to have a wardrobe that mirrors who you are, and I am so ready to help make that happen. You can find me on the web at mfdstyle.com. Thanks so much for listening today. If you enjoyed what you've heard, I would appreciate you taking the time to leave a review on the podcasting platform you're using and share this episode with others who you think might really enjoy these conversations about personal style. For more information all about MFD Style services, you can find me on the web at mfdstyle.com, on Instagram at mfd_style, where I post almost 5 days a week, or send me an email at maria@mfdstyle.com. I also have a weekly email I send to subscribers, so I will include the link to that sign up in the show notes. So until next time, friends, remember to love yourself and then love yourself some more.